So there's going to be 12 games to look at in terms of the preview for the midweek games, but rather me doing 12 games of preview right now, knowing the fact that it's already 10:36 in the evening, and if I'm going to do 12 games of preview, I will be basically doing the preview until midnight, which that is something I don't want to do. I'm just going to look at the first 6 games of the midweek games action as part of the first part of the preview, and then I think on Tuesday or tomorrow, I'm just going to look at the remaining game of the preview of these midweek game action, depending on if I actually have time to do video tomorrow. Well, actually, I should have a lot of time to do video tomorrow because the only games for tomorrow is going to be NYCFC versus the Columbus Crew, which this game kicks off at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific time. And NYCFC, of course, lost 1-0 against the Redbulls away in the last match, and I wrote quotation mark away because technically they weren't really the away team. I mean, they're now basically playing at Red Bull Arena for the rest of their season for their home games. So yeah, it's not really an away game if you're just playing the stadium. That's going to be your temporary home. Well, Columbus, of course, they won 3-0 against the Chicago Fire at home. And the storyline coming out of this game for NYCFC is Maxi Morales going to be back on this team. Now, I'm pretty sure he's not going to be starting in this game, but at least is he going to be at least on the bench and comes off the bench for NYCFC when they need to have some goals scoring threat. Clearly, NYCFC is still heavily reliant on Maxi Morales, and we already seen that when they don't have Maxi Morales in that attack, they just cannot function whatsoever, and none of those guys on the attacking end for NYCFC can score goals without him. So, be interesting to see if Ronnie Delia might think about bringing him back in the lineup, and that I'm pretty sure he's not going to be playing in this game as a starter, mainly because he's still recovering from that injuries that kind of bother him during the MLS's back tournament, even though he did actually make a couple substitute appearances in the MLS's back tournament. Well, for Columbus, it's kind of the same story as NYCFC. Is their number 10, Lucas Zalarian, is going to be back on this team. Obviously, Zalarian didn't play in that game against the Chicago Fire, and apparently Caleb Porter said that he, of course, suffered kind of like a little bit of a knee injury during the MLS's back tournament, and the reason why they decided to not kind of rush him back in that game against Chicago is because they want to give him as much rest as possible. And in this one, I won't be surprised if he decided to rest him again, because I think this is a game, whether if Columbus has Zalarian or not, I still think this is the one that they're going to win, because, you know, in the last game when they show that even without Zalarian and their best player on the team, they can still get resort against a Chicago team that definitely was not very good. And coming into this game away against an NYCFC that is another team that is not having a lot of good success this season, I think this is another game where Columbus can get away with not having Zalarian as their starting number 10, and they can of course score, and of course they are able to score goals to win this game against NYCFC. So I'm going to predict that Columbus is going to win NYCFC in this game. But moving on, in terms of the next match, is DC United versus New England Revolution. Now, I understand a lot of people are going to say this is probably going to be a 0-0 result because, you know, both of these teams drew 0-0 in their last match, with DC drawing 0-0 to FC Cincinnati away, while the Revs drawing 0-0 to Philly at home. The record-wise, DC United is 1-3-2, while New England is 1-4-1, as this game is going to be kicking off at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific time. But the only difference is this game is going to be the first Tuesday game that is going to be kicking off. But that being said, I have a feeling we're probably going to see goals in this game, but maybe that might not be the case for DC United, because, you know, their biggest storyline is, can anyone on that attack actually score goals? Like right now, DC United, after that game against FC Cincinnati, it is pretty clear that they still don't have a goal scored whatsoever on their team. And all those signings that I mentioned that kind of flopped during the MLS's back tournament, yeah, they continue to look like even bigger of a flop with the way that they're still not being able to perform and score the goals that this DC team desperately needs. And in many ways, this team just looked like a very lifeless kind of boring team. And I am definitely not surprised to see a lot of DC fans are very angry with the way that this team has played. And also, a lot of them are calling Ben Olsen's heads because he has basically put this team playing some of the most boring soccer any team in the league are playing right now. Now, the refs, on the other hand, the good news coming into this game is that Bruce Arena is going to be back on the touchline for the refs after he was being suspended in the last game, after he kind of had some choice words in that elimination game against Orlando City right at the end of the game, and thus that's why he, of course, was suspended and banned from the touchline in that game against the Union. But with him back on the touchline, I think New England should be a little bit better. Like, in the last game, they clearly should have won that one against the Union. They had a ton of chances in that game, and that if they are able to score the goals against DC United and able to get the win in this one, they need to take advantage of their chances. But with that being said, I'm going to say this is going to be a draw, and it is going to be a draw. As much as I don't want to say that this is going to be one of those low-scoring 0-0 resort, it could be the case if DC United is just not gonna be able to finish their chances or even attack throughout the game, or if New England is going to be like the last game where they just cannot finish if their life actually depends on. But moving on, in terms of the next match, is going to be Chicago versus FC Cincinnati. Now, Chicago currently have a record of 1-1-4, while FC Cincinnati currently have a 2-1-3 record. This game is going to be kicking off at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific. The biggest storyline coming out of this game has to be that this is the first ever home game for the Chicago Fire at Soldier Field since 2006, when they, of course, moved to Bridgeville to temporarily, well, I wouldn't say temporary, but kind of permanently playing their games there. And then they later found out that nobody actually goes to their game because they just basically built a stadium that was way out of Chicago and just no way to actually get to. Well, their first game, of course, is going to be playing against a Cincinnati team that drew 0-0 against DC United, while Chicago, of course, lost 3-0 to Columbus away. And for FC Cincinnati, they kind of have the same issue that DC had. Can they, of course, find a way to score a goals to win this game? And that, I feel like this is a winnable game for FC Cincinnati, because I know the Chicago Fire is still in a process where they're still trying to figure out their main strength and also their identity of the team. And certainly Raphael Wittke is trying his best to gather all these guys that he, of course, got during the offseason and trying to mesh to each other to make it a complete team. And, FC Cincinnati, when you look at these last couple of games, they haven't been pretty decent, even though one of the issue that I do have with FC Cincinnati and for the Upston team is that they just still don't have that goal scored in their team, and that as much as I know they have been very resolute in terms of their defending, and at times they look dangerous on the counterattack, they need to score goals if they want to, of course, win games. And that this is another game where, just like that DC United game, a game that I think it's a winnable game for FC Cincinnati. But that being said, I'm actually going to take a surprising prediction and kind of an upset prediction. I'm not sure if this is an upset if Chicago beat FC Cincinnati, but the reason why I'm picking Chicago in this one is because this is the first home game for them at Soldier Field since 2006. And even though I know there's going to be no fans in attendance in this game, and that if there was fans in attendance of this game, there probably would have been upwards of 30,000 fans, since I know back in March when they announced the tickets for this game, there was going to be upwards about 30,000 fans attending this one. And that I think since this is their first home game at their old home, they're going to definitely feel a little bit more up for this game and definitely feel some more energy in terms of getting a win in this one. And also knowing the fact that the Chicago Fire is a very inconsistent team, and you just don't know what they actually produce. I guess maybe I'm just going to guess the fact that since they've been so bad for the past couple of games, they're due to potentially get a victory, and maybe this one might be the one that they're gonna get. And talk about how this is a winnable game for FC Cincinnati against Chicago. This is also kind of a winnable game, vice versa, for Chicago against an FC Cincinnati team that, like I said, despite the fact that they're resolute in terms of defense, they're not very good on the attack again. And as long as if you can figure out the complex defensive structure that Yapstan FC Cincinnati team puts on their opponent, you're going to find a way to score goals and able to win the game. So yeah, I'm gonna pick the Fire to win that one. But moving on, in terms of the next match, is the Union versus the Redbulls. So the Union currently have a record of 2-3-1, while the Redbulls surprisingly have a record of 3-1-2. And the reason why I say surprisingly is because even though they're the top 3 team right now in the standings in the Eastern Conference, they don't look like the top 3 team in the Eastern Conference, especially the ways that they've been playing the last couple of games. And that, I'm going to say it, I feel like that game against NYCFC and in that New York / Red Bull Arena derby was an absolute fluke of a win that they, of course, got. Which, speaking of which, that is exactly the result that they got, a 1-0 win against NYCFC at home. While the Union, of course, did not have a good game against New England, and were pretty lucky to able to get a 0-0 draw out of that game. The storyline of this game, can they, of course, rebound after that disappointing game against New England? They just looked very lifeless in that game against New England. And if it wasn't for Andre Blake making some crucial save, and also the fact that the refs were not being very clinical whatsoever, or if the refs were being a little bit more clinical in that game, they probably would have not got a point out of New England out of that one. So we'll see if the Union can rebound in this game against the Red Bulls team. And the question for the Red Bulls is, does Chris Armas play with no number 9 again in this one? Now, in the last game, Chris Armas decided to go with no natural striker in this team, and it's understandable why he decided to go with no number 9, because there really isn't a number 9 on this team to be able to score the goals, and they still have not found a replacement to Bradley Wright Phillips that they lost during the off season. But that being said, the other thing I will also put on the storyline for the Red Bulls is Chris Armas going to start Kaku in this game? Because you can see in the last game when Kaku came on for the Red Bulls, they look much more dangerous going forward on the attack, and that it just makes me wonder, why exactly did Armas decide not to start Kaku in the last game and decided to just kind of bring him on the bench? So I'm hoping that he potentially might be starting him in this game and gives some more attacking threat for the Red Bulls. That it just seemed like that's been the biggest issue with the Red Bulls this season. With them, despite the fact having 3 wins this season, they haven't looked very good at all in terms of the attacking end. But that being said, in terms of prediction, I'm going to go with the Union in this one, because again, I think the Union will find their form that they had in the MLS's back tournament and able to overcome a Red Bulls team that, I just don't think they're going to have enough attack in this game to able to get a victory against the Philadelphia Union. But that being said, moving on into the next match is another Canadian affair, or all-Canadian affair. But this time it's going to be the Montreal Impact versus the Vancouver Whitecaps. The Impact, of course, coming into this game with a record of 2-1-2, while the Whitecaps coming into this game with a record of 2-0-5, and they're one of the last teams to actually play their first game ever since the MLS is back tournament, as this game is going to be kicking off at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. As I mentioned, this is the first game for the Impact since they got eliminated by Orlando City in the round of 16. And kind of just jump right into the storylines in terms of that, is there going to be some rust that Thierry Henry team is going to actually be suffering throughout this game? Because it's been a long time since the Impact have played that round of 16 game against Orlando City, and we already saw during the first week of these team coming back, or at least for for those teams back on Thursday and Friday when they play their first game, even though they've been only off by 3 or 4 weeks, or in some case, a couple of teams has been off by a month. They have definitely not been able to find their match fitness and sharpness like they did throughout the MLS is back tournament, and you wonder, is Montreal going to have that issue again? Now, for Vancouver, they of course lost Toronto 1-0 away back on Saturday, and it's been difficult for the Whitecaps ever since they've had that surprising run in the MLS's back tournament, losing twice to Toronto, and in both games, they definitely did not look like a team that could actually get a win in this season MLS. I mean, so far in these first 2 games, they have just been playing in a deep block and just hope that they maybe can get a 0-0 result or just hit on the counterattack to get a lucky goal. But other than that, they just have done nothing on the attack. And it just gets to some point where I feel like Marc Dos Santos have to clearly tell his team that don't be afraid to try to open yourself up, and don't be afraid to just kind of sit in a compact shape. Yes, I know they don't have a lot of attacking power. Well, that's actually not true because they have Cavallini back, and I'm kind of surprised. Why have they not think about being a little bit more progressive going for it on the attacking? Just give the ball to Cavallini and see what he can do with it. Because right now, this is not like back in the MLS's back tournament where they are playing kind of a USL level kind of squad and they were trying to hold on for most of the game. They actually got some of their starters back in this game, so I'm kind of surprised the fact that they're still playing in the same shape that they did in the MLS's back tournament. But that being said, coming into this game, I think this could be a draw between both of these teams. And just like how last week when I previewed the FC Cincinnati versus DC United game, and I told you all that this could be a game that might not be the one that neutrals want to watch because it could be a very boring 0-0 resort. Well, this one might be the game that is going to be just like the DC United versus FC Cincinnati game, where this one could be a very stale and very, very boring game, and that don't expect there's going to be a lot of goals. That is going to happen unless if we decide to go peak MLS, and that this will just defy all logic, and it turns out to be a 4-3 resort between the Montreal Impact and the Vancouver Whitecaps. But, in all seriousness, I think this game is going to be a really boring game, and there's really not much that is going to happen in this one. But that being said, moving on into the last game that I'm going to be previewing is the rematch of the second game of the season between Sporting KC and the Houston Dynamo. The Dynamo is the only team in the league yet to register a win, as they have a record of 0-4-2, while Sporting KC currently have a record of 5-1-0, and they're one of the few teams that still have not lost a single game this season. This game kicks off at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific. Sporting KC, of course, got that big victory against Minnesota away by winning 2-1, while the Dynamo, of course, drew 0-0 against FC Dallas at home in the Texas Derby. Now, the storyline for Sporting KC, they seem to have a lot of momentum right now in terms of this 2020 season. So the question is, can they continue that momentum after that big away win against the Loons in that battle for the top 2 spot in the Western Conference? And as for the Dynamo, can they not actually just get flat out embarrassed again by Sporting KC? I mean, back in that second game of the season, yeah, it was just men against boys in terms of the way Sporting KC and the Houston Dynamo play, and that Sporting KC completely wiped the floor off of the Houston Dynamo in this game. And that, I think that game was probably the worst game out of all these games I've seen a Tab Ramos Dynamo team has been playing. So that I'm pretty sure Tab Ramos will realize that they are probably not going to. He cannot not allow that to happen again, and that I expect the Dynamo to be a little bit more competitive in this one against Sporting KC. But that being said, I am going to go with Sporting KC with this one because, again, I think Peter Vermeer's team has a lot of momentum. They definitely have an identity in their team. I mean, the only question I do have with this SKC team is on the defensive end, because there's been times where they have looked a little bit shaky in terms of the defense, but either way, going forward on the attack, they are a very explosive kind of team, and playing against a Dynamo team that also have a very shoddy defense. Yeah, I expect they should be able to get a win in this one, although I think this is going to be more competitive than what we saw in that 4-0 beatdown that SKC handed to Houston earlier this season between both of these teams. But that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button. As always, let me know in the comments below about these 6 games and also your prediction for these 6 games. That is part of the first part of the preview for these midweek games that is happening. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I, of course, will see you guys next time.